So I've been seeing this sentiment floating around among the community ever since Battlefield 2042 dropped. Never really bought into it myself, but it's something that's been gaining more and more traction lately. Today we are talking about this whole idea that Battlefield 5 was not as bad as we thought, that it was underrated, and even going as far as saying that it aged like fine wine. Today we're going to put this absolute dumpster tier take in the bin where it belongs because it just doesn't make any sense. It's almost like the Battlefield community has some sort of recency bias when it comes to choosing on whatever game we're going to hate on, because I swear I must have played a different BF5 to these people. Anyways, let's get started with this, and we're going to start with something completely undisputable. The live service for Battlefield 5 was cancelled. There you go. DICE themselves decided the game wasn't worth continuing, and they went and worked on their next masterpiece instead. You know it's bad when even DICE can see and admit the problem, something that they've pretty much never really done, especially in terms of 2042 so far. Of course, going further though, let's look at some of the reasons this even happened. Firstly, they changed the time to kill and basically 180'd the balance of the game twice, despite the community doing everything in their power to ask for the contrary. Sure, the first time kind of made a little bit of sense, they hadn't really done it before, and the data did show that it would have been a good idea to change the balance like this, and honestly I can see where they're coming from. However, the community really didn't like it and they just took it back, which is the right thing to do. However, the second time that they changed the TTK, couldn't have been timed worse. The game was pretty much getting revived with the Pacific update, and then they went and did this. After that update went through and they didn't really revert it in good time, they eventually did, but it was too little too late. The game basically fell down into the depths, and the game would have had just so much more success if they never did this. And it's definitely one of the factors that caused Battlefield 5 to die. The game itself though is just something that I wouldn't expect to age well, let alone age like fine wine. Mechanically, it's just so close to being decent, but at the same time, it's so far as well. So starting with gunplay, the game has something called spread to recoil, which a lot of us just called random recoil. In most Battlefield titles, you have a consistent recoil pattern along with spread, and being accurate involves managing both of these factors along with tracking the target. In Battlefield 5 though, the spread was removed, which caused many ill-informed people to call the gunplay laser accurate BF3 style, but what they were missing was the fact that all that spread was just directly converted into recoil, which is now random. In some gunfights, you would find that the gun was really accurate and felt great, and then sometimes it would just go all over the place, and you're literally just flipping a coin to decide whether you get a good gun or a bad gun in any given fight. It just doesn't make any sense, it's not predictable, and it's not really that satisfying to play. What was just as bad though was the fact that aiming wasn't tied to the screen center either, but instead it was actually tied to your in-game crosshair. This does kind of make sense if you just say it like that, but think about how the crosshair moves while you're moving in game, which means that your point of aiming is always kind of just moving around. This is something that pretty much no other game does, which makes Battlefield 5 aiming its own little skill. Again, another example of DICE reinventing the wheel when it just really wasn't that necessary. Both of these things in my opinion made Battlefield 5 gunplay some of the worst in franchise history. Mechanically speaking, we also had attrition, which was just a painful debate to have with people. Most people never really experience attrition at all because you only experience it when you survive for a long time. It's a mechanic that literally just punished you for surviving, and it pretty much only punished good players in that way. I'm definitely glad it didn't return in 2042, and it was an absolutely abysmal mechanic. But let's say none of this bothers you. Maybe you actually enjoy all that stuff. Maybe you enjoy suffering like it's a real war. Honestly, good for you. I'm not going to say that you can't have an opinion and you can't enjoy whatever you want. But let's just go and try to find a server. Oh wait, you've either got badmins or cheaters. That's pretty much why I left Battlefield 5. It was just being stuck between a rock and a hard place. I know the situation is probably worse in OC and Asia, which happens to be where I like to play the game. But from what I've heard, cheaters are everywhere. You know, NA, EU, everywhere is going to have cheater problems. And there was literally known cheaters in our community who didn't deny it at all. And they'd even talk about how DICE and EA would never ban them in the all chat. You know, the audacity to actually type that in the chat and just know fully well that you're never going to get banned. It's a really frustrating experience just as a legit player yourself. And now there's what you're seeing right now, the vehicles. I fell in love with the vehicles in Battlefield 4. It's like you're getting multiple games all in one there. There's so many things you can learn and there's so much depth. Then I went to Battlefield 5 from that, and it was just all gone. Like almost every single skill ceiling had a shortcut in Battlefield 5. For example, I like to use the cannons in the planes, you know, I found it fun trying to strafe infantry with the guns on the fighter planes, and I thought that was a fun little skill to have. However, anyone could just hop in a bomber, put a bombing circle on the enemy and click, and you're going to be much more effective that way. Just so many of these little shortcuts that completely remove the necessity of actually acquiring some skill. Then you have the other problem with Battlefield 5 vehicles, and it's that they were heavily balanced in the direction of farming infantry. This is very different from Battlefield 3 and 4, where vehicle 1v1s are very common to the point of them being an absolutely essential skill. In Battlefield 5, most people just truced because the game punished anyone who dared to try to push the enemy team and actually get into that 1v1 position. You usually get like 3v1s or you get AA'd. It just wasn't really worth doing most of the time. Whereas in Battlefield 4 especially, if you wanted to succeed in a vehicle and if you were going to farm infantry, you definitely had to take that 1v1 first. You know, there was going to be someone on the enemy team, maybe a good player, maybe a bad player, and you just had to kill them. You had to take that 1v1 because if you didn't, they were going to kill you, and that's just how it was. I mean, I remember back in Battlefield 4, towards the end of the game, I was playing some scrims and like competitive games, and my 1v1s were a little bit weak, to be honest. I mean, I was getting outclassed by a fair few jet pilots there, so I spent weeks in a dogfight server just practicing and grinding my skills to the point where I could hold my own. And this was just one of the best parts of Battlefield 4 to me. It was one of the most fun experiences I had, putting all that time into the 1v1 server, and then actually seeing all that time turn into just having better fights and more of a chance in these competitive games I was playing. Anyways, back to Battlefield 5, it wasn't all bad, so let's talk about a couple of the things that Battlefield 5 did well. It's definitely a short list, but starting it out, the maps were pretty good in my opinion. On a majority of the maps, you could play infantry or vehicles without punishment, and you could pretty much top frag in either of those things. Both are usually pretty fun on most of the maps. There were some really bad maps, but there were also some really great ones. Devastation, Underground, Al Marj, and even Merida were all super enjoyable to play, and in my eyes, 2042 doesn't even have a single map on this caliber. Along with maps, other things that I thought were great were sniping and the quality of life features. I won't go too far into them, they're just small little things, but I enjoyed both of those things quite a lot. I guess at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, do these positives outweigh the sea of negatives of BF5? For me, definitely not. You know, I stand by what I said. The game is being severely overrated right now, and it's almost like we're already getting these rose tint glasses effect, where people are thinking the game was a lot better than it really actually was. This game aged poorly, and is an excuse of a Battlefield game. Just because Battlefield 2042 came out like it did, does not make Battlefield 5 any better or any more acceptable. I think we have to hold dice to these kind of terrible decisions, so that I don't think that we really love this game when in fact it was not that great. Anyways, am I right? Am I wrong? Let me know in the comments. That's it for this one. Take it easy, guys. Peace.